Hello everyone, this is Crota giving you a shoutcast between YellowDragon and Argos Zenith here on Lost Temple. I believe this is just a BattleNet game, no sort of qualifier, should be an interesting matchup. Here we have YellowDragon spawning as the red Protoss player at the 8 o'clock position. Meanwhile, we have Argos Zenith spawning over here at the 7 o'clock position here on Lost Temple as the blue Zerg player. Now, Argos Zenith really likes to scout out with this Overlord and then try to do some sneaky trickery and try to move this Overlord back over here. He will be able to find this Nexus fairly quickly. Now, one of the things to note is that the sight range, I believe, is based on the center of the unit. So that Nexus has, I believe, a sight range of about 9. But because its center is a little bit further than this Overlord, the Overlord will be able to move over, get sight of the Nexus, and then try to pull back around. So let's see if Argos Zenith does this once again. Yeah, does see the Nexus, and yeah, and you can see that the Nexus was not able to see that Overlord. So that Overlord now going to go ahead and fly around. However, YellowDragon now moving out with a very early scout. Well, I'm scouting right after that. Right after that. Pylon should be pretty interesting as this probe now going to be coming into position. However, the drone was able to quickly reveal this probe over here, so he knows that he's not going to be able to trick him all too long, as there is now a gateway being placed down over here. A little bit surprised by the positioning of this gateway. Perhaps another building will be placed over here to try to make some sort of choke point, as it's not really working out. This Overlord now perhaps going to move around back over here into that position where most Overlords like to hang out for fun. Over here we do see a hatchery now being placed down, and Argos Zenith now going for an early hatchery, knowing that the assimilator was being placed down, so he knows that it's not going to be any sort of 2-gate rush. Drone now making its way out, deciding to just go back in and try to continue to look for any additional scouting information. And back over here we see a probe now from YellowDragon gaining sight into this base, and we should be throwing down a spawning pool in just one moment. Not 100% sure what this drone is doing. That drone, gonna go ahead and try to block any sort of pylon play, but there is no forge that I see, so Zerglings would be able to take that very easily. However, now chrono boosting these zealots out of here, so this is going to be a very, very bad sign for Argos. Argos needs to get this spawning pool up very quickly. It will take some time to walk this distance. This zealot has a movement speed of 2.25. I do not know the number of pixels that it takes from Lost Temple down to over here, but it's probably in the 50 to 60 range. So the spawning pool will get done right around the zealot getting into this position, trying to do some math estimation, as we have an extractor now being built and canceled over here. We do see that spawning pool now coming into position. Zealot is right over here, and it looks like I was just a little bit off there, as a zealot now going to start poking away at that one drone, and down it goes. We do see some drones now being transferred over, and will those drones grow up to be spine crawlers is the question. Drones now getting the surround. Oh, beautifully done, pulling away with the last low hit point drone there. So that's really, really nicely done, trying to save and trying to maximize all the damage on all of these units as Zerglings now come out to engage over here. Down goes that probe, and if this micro actually is effective, that will be one of the most beautiful micros I've seen. That one zealot had the potential to deal so much damage, but pulling back a lot of low hit point drones. So you can see taking one round of attack on the drone, pulling it away, taking another round of attack on the drone, pulling it, or 2 rounds of attack, pulling it away, and it really worked out well. We do see the second gateway now being warped in, as the cybernetics core has already been completed, and now researching that warp gate ability. We do have double gas. So I'm kind of curious as to what strategy that Fast Dragon or YellowDragon will be going for in just a moment, as Zerglings now realizing that they cannot put any real sort of pressure there, and those one more Zergling may get shot down, probably not, as a Zergling has a 2.91 movement speed, or 2.95 versus a 2.95 on the Stalker, but the Stalker has to stop in order to hit it. Back over here we do see one queen over here, and we also see the robotics facility now being placed down. That robotics facility most likely going to train up an observer first, and may try to go for Colossus. Colossus, a very, very standard unit in the Protoss arsenal against Zerg. Zerg normally doesn't like to make corruptors, as there's really nothing to shoot out of the sky, and then if you get too many corruptors, the Protoss player can just transition into a 4-gate or 6-gate army and then mass produce stalkers. If you do not have the ability to train those brood lords, then that becomes an issue. Back over here, Argos Zenith continue to train up more and more drones. His harvester count fairly saturated over here, sitting at 25 harvesters with some drones over here as well. We should probably be seeing some more drones being trained. Yeah, 2 more drones being trained. In comes this observer, and now this overlord suiciding into the base, trying to get as much sight. Does get sight of that all-important robotics facility, as we now have an overlord making its way over here. So the overlord may be able to spot out some key tech. So this is one of those key things that you should remember as a Protoss player and a Terran player fighting against a Zerg. Do not hide your tech here. Against a Terran player, you generally want to hide your tech away from your natural building, but it looks as though for a versus a Zerg player, you want to try to group all your tech buildings together just so that they're not going to be spotted. We are upgrading the tier 2, and now in comes this observer. We do see a good amount of Zerglings over here with that metabolic boost, and now produce getting up to tier 2, more drones or more larvae now being thrown down all across the map as well. So taking a look at the hatcheries, the hatcheries are on different hotkeys. So 8 larvae between the 2, as this overlord now going to go ahead and just suicide once again in, trying to get more and more sight. He needs to know if it's going to be Colossus or if it's going to be Immortals, and in comes this overlord. Will it work? It looks as though the stalkers do not quite see that there's an overlord in the base just quite yet. Now has to come over this mineral line, sees this, and if that immortal is spotted, that will be absolutely critical for Argos. Will Argos see the immortal? Yes, he does see the immortal, and getting pulled out as that immortal is trained. So he knows not to go for any roaches, and now going for that spire. So that spire may work out fairly well. There are a couple Zerglings, another force field catching one of those Zerglings out of position. There is another overlord, so the stalkers may try to shoot down that overlord once again. Down to 57 over 68 now, and getting a couple quick kills over here. Zerglings want to try to perhaps do some sort of run by into the base. This is all off of one base, so YellowDragon just all stuck off of running all of this off of one base will be fairly effective, as this army of YellowDragon very, very strong. So the Stalker and Immortal Sentry army may be able to push in very easily. Creep Tumors unable to burrow in time, and that's always an issue there, as now we see a Spine Crawler trying to root into position. There is no there is the Observer here, so will it be able to help? Zergling's not trying to get a surround over here. That one Spine Crawler will be able to start slashing away at these Stalkers. A force field, a very nice force field is being placed down, so YellowDragon just doing a great job. However, this force field does not completely stop this whole entire fight over here. That Spine Crawler just out of position, however, will be able to pick off a lot of these units here. Mass Zerglings just simply destroying this army here. However, I believe some harvesters were taken down. Yeah, so Argos Zenith now sitting at 22 harvesters as opposed to 34 for YellowDragon. So YellowDragon having that economic lead. However, he is only off of one base, so he is beyond saturation over here. Needs to get another base relatively quickly, otherwise he will mine out this base in just a matter of minutes. Zergling still standing guard over here. Mutalisk now being trained. So we have 2 Mutalisks currently being trained. There doesn't seem to be enough gas. An Overseer now being able to get sight onto that Observer. Observer down to 15 hit points. Will it be able to escape? No, it will not, as that it was now taken down. So no Observers in the base of Argos Zenith any further, as now we see some Stalkers, Immortals, and Sentries trying to once again engage. Very nicely done, placing that force field there, making it very difficult for any of these Zerglings to get any real sort of surround. 1400 mineral army for YellowDragon. Meanwhile, Argos sitting at 1225. Over here, we do see some Mutalisk play now trying to come in, and these photon cannons, 3 of them now being warped in. So as these photon cannons are being warped in, these Mutalisks may be able to rack up 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 kills. A Sentry now being brought into position, and that will get shot down over here. Observer does not, or the Overseer does not have that movement speed just quite yet. So, and perhaps needs to be upgraded. That force field once again blocking that unit right there, as we see more and more production building. So this is a 3-gate off of a robotics facility so far. Zergling sitting up here and now continuing to fight back around. We do see the Spire, no weapons upgrade just quite yet, but training 5 more Mutalisks, as Argos Zenith running off of 4 gas now. So those 2 Mutalisks will have 5 BFFs and be able to just deal a lot of damage. However, those photon cannons in position, it will take a proper positioning, and this one Mutalisk very low on hit points, now trying to pull away, may get a transfusion as it returns home. Stalkers may try to come back up in order to reinforce as well. Sentries I believe sentries almost deal as much damage as a stalker. However, they have that guardian shield in order to absorb a lot of that damage as well. So more Mutalisk being macroed up here. So who does Argos Zenith think he is? Mad Frog trying to get 9 Mutalisk in the position here as these Zerglings now just macroing up over here. At this time, I would suggest that Argos Zenith try to take up a third base, just because he already has YellowDragon just really confined into one base already. So these Mutalisks off over here on that high ground and not being able to be seen, may be able to come back around. Are they going to be able to start picking off some of these units? Going after that sentry, yeah, going to go be able to splash 1 damage. Oh no, unable to get that attack off. So a little bit surprised by that. Perhaps going to go back in. Yeah, down goes 1 and taking some fair amount of damage back over here. Zerglings still sitting over here. These sentries are really going to be the issue, because those sentries counter those Zerglings really well just by placing down those force fields. No upgrade to tier 3 just quite yet, as the Spire now coming in, Spore Crawler, and now an even larger army of Mutalisks. So we're going to have 15 Mutalisks in this army, and with 15 Mutalisks, you are able, what, 15 times 9, a whole lot of damage, more than 130, I believe. We'll be able to just pick off a lot of these units in transition. Down go 2 quick sentries, and now going after some more of these units, deciding to pull back once again. A lot of those Mutalisks, however, have taken some fair amount of damage. However, no transfusions just quite yet. Still, Zerglings sitting out at this front door, keeping track, just trying to stay within the space. We do see 1 Overseer in the base over here, may be able to get some contaminates off, and now in come those stalkers. Stalkers may be able to pick off some of those Mutalisks down still at 15. So more and more units. We do not see any sort of Stargate, and that's really what I would like to see more Protoss players going. Stargate play, perhaps the Stargate play is just really strong. Instead going for a Twilight Council. Twilight Council with Stalker Blink will be able to get a decent movement speed onto these units. Let me go ahead and pull that away. Yeah, decent movement speed as those Mutalisks now deciding to pull back once again. So those Mutalisks back over here going to start to regenerate some hit points, getting a massive amount of a Mutalisk. And now, as I'm thinking about this, that Twilight Council may just be for the Templar Archives. The Templar Archives, in order to get that all-important Psystorm to try to stop these, just bunching Mutalisks. So many Mutalisks just taking down those 2 quick Guardian Shields and now just tearing apart those Stalkers. Those Mutalisks have hit critical mass and are able to deal so much damage, taking down unit after unit, building after building, and now pulling back once again. So 2650 versus 2350, beautifully done, as we now see mass spine crawlers in the front of the base. So right outside this base over here, these spine crawlers will cause a lot of problems. Spine crawlers should be able to start moving into this position, and then it will be very difficult for any of those stalkers to really do anything about it, as these spine crawlers have a range of 7. Stalkers do see that there is 1 spine crawler being morphed in here, and now will these spine crawlers start making their way out is the critical question, and more drones being transferred over. So this is mass spine crawler play. So as opposed to Mutaling, he is going for a Muta crawler. So at this time, just so much damage being done, and now finally taking down so many of these buildings over here. No, I do not see a Templar Archives. We do see Groove Spines now being upgraded, and no Stalker Blink being researched. So really, YellowDragon on the ropes, really be able to do anything about this, as these spine crawlers are now being morphed into position. Rooted into position. So as these buildings are starting to root, they will be able to start hitting up onto this high ledge over here. So that's going to cause some issues, and I'm really surprised that Argos still not taking up a third base. Spoke too soon, as now he is using Zerglings to try to take down these destructible rocks over here. We are seeing the level 1 weapons upgrade and the level 1 carapace upgrade, and getting some roaches as well. Back over here, Stalkers now trying to deal with this army over here, as now we have Mutalisks just in this base, now going after this pylon. As soon as that pylon's gone, these 2 photon cannons will get taken down. No, not going after the pylon, only going after that Twilight Council, and now going after more and more pylons here. Zerglings fighting on the low ground, spine crawlers slashing away at these Stalkers, and now that army, Mutalisk army, very small. However, I do not know why these Stalkers are continuing to fight against this static, stationary defense here. These spine crawlers will get taken down. However, these Mutalisks now taking down more and more of these production buildings, trying to take down the Templar Archives. Absolutely critical that this gets taken down. However, Stalkers and Immortals now moving out, and will be able to deal more and more damage over here. Templar Archives now very low on hit points as well, as my timer goes off. So stay tuned for part 2 of this replay between Argos Zenith and YellowDragon here on Lost Temple.